I think that she is.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our usual practice is anyone who wants to address a topic that is not on the agenda can do that, so they don't have to stay for the whole work session if they don't want to. Okay, Michael Greener, come up to the podium and announce yourself, please.
I'm Mike Gaynor, 8 Cobbetts Lane, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak the way you changed the agenda. That's been really helpful, and I apologize. I took 7 minutes last time. I'm going to try and do it much faster today. I thought there is a little bit of a background that I needed to discuss about Mike Gaynor in particular. I moved here in 2019. Actually, in 2018, I purchased 8 and 10 Cobbetts Lane. And I'm a developer, everybody knows that. And I've been trying since then to protect the property rights on 10 Cobbetts Lane. Tried to have a conversation about that with everybody, which you well know. And that conversation has gone nowhere. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that, and I'm not going to get into that right now. But I have an enormous chip on my shoulder, and everybody knows that. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today and have gone down the rabbit hole and will continue to go down the rabbit hole on items like this, because I feel like the town treats people unfairly. Long track record of people being treated unfairly. Some people get treated one way in this community, some people get treated another way. So last week I came here and I presented to the board some facts about Sylvester Manor being treated differently than everybody else inside of this community. And those facts seem to go back all the way back to at least 2010. They rear their head inside of various different places. Basically says that the manor has been allowed to operate inside of an AA zone without a special permit. And I confronted the board with that, and it's a bifurcated issue as far as I'm concerned. There's 2 things happening there. One, we have a use inside of a zone that's not permitted and it's active and everybody in the community knows about it. And 2, the scarier part is the board seemed to have had a hand in it based on the data that I've produced. And 3, the Shelter Island Reporter has also participated inside of this. They reported it on multiple occasions, and you guys know I all feel very strongly about newspapers inside of this community and their role and the need for them. So that one of all the 3 players inside of this story, the Shelter Island Reporter, not reporting on any of this to the community really struck home. And so I guess I would like to start out where we last left it. You said you were going to look into this, that this was a matter that the board was familiar with, and I was wondering if you had any updates on that.
We're continuing to look into it.
You're continuing to look at it.
On anything at this point, but
Okay, I appreciate that. There were some facts that I wanted to share publicly that I think are important for the community to understand so they can process this stuff. First and foremost, one of the things that happened, and the reason I started down this path, there was an article inside of the Shelter Island Reporter that said that this topic had been presented to the board. So the manor knew that they needed a special permit. The entire board knew that they needed a special permit. And the last words inside of that article from 2013 was that Jim Doherty, the supervisor at the time, asked that the manor keep them apprised of what was going on over in the manor. He wanted to see their plans, quote unquote, which I provided you some of those documents. The plan Jim Doherty was looking for, I received this plan in 2019. This is their full plan for Sylvester Manor. I received this plan when I donated, just so everybody knows that I don't have that big of a chip on my shoulder. I gave Sylvester Manor $30,000. I donated that to them. I came to the community. I wanted to be a good community member. I handed them 30 grand. They gave me this. What this plan calls for, and the plan that Jim Doherty and the rest of the town board would have seen, is that Sylvester Manor wants to do some cool things like provide parking out there for 347 cars. They want to build a barn that will accommodate 600-person sit-down weddings. What 600-person weddings have to do with preserving the historic Sylvester Manor, I have no idea. And it goes on and on and on like that. More importantly, right now, Sylvester Manor, so if in fact I'm correct, and I have yet to hear any facts that would refute that, if in fact I'm correct about all of this, Sylvester Manor is out there with full knowledge of everybody. There's not a week that goes by. It's inside of the manor this week. They're raising money against this illegal use that's out there. They're running quarter-page ads. Here they are, half-page ads. They're raising money off of this community to extend an existing use that's not allowed inside of this community. What that means is 1 in 3 people who are going to see this ad are over 65 years of age. So they're basically going out and illegally raising money to further an existing use inside of this community that's not permitted. And I have real questions about that. I checked with the New York State Attorney General's office. They have a group within them that specifically monitors charities. And apparently Sylvester Manor has not been registered to be a charity inside of the state of New York since 2019. I have copies of their audits. It goes on and on. And so this is a really, really, really important issue. There's many important things that need to be going on here. And I believe that this board has a responsibility to this community to examine this publicly so everybody can see what happens. This is a common thread. I know the same people come in here all the time, and there's a lot of jovialness inside of this community and a lot of camaraderie and everything like that. There's a whole subset of people that never step foot into this place because they don't think they're going to get a fair shake, and they don't believe inside of government. I think a rare opportunity exists right now to examine exactly what happened here. What I don't want to see happen is what happened to Jim Colligan. If you guys remember, Jim Colligan squared off with one of the employees or whatever happened over at the dump with Ron over at the dump. And the town went ahead and they expended God knows how much money producing this paperwork. They hired an attorney to go investigate that matter. And then this thing wound up in the circular file someplace. As much as I am unhappy for the way I've been treated inside of this community, what I really want to see happen is this place change the way it operates. This is not going to do anything. So if this is on your agenda somewhere that we're going to go hire some outside counsel and they're going to go investigate all this and we'll go exhume Jim Doherty or whatever ridiculous thing that's going to happen, that's not going to solve the problem. People are still not going to have a lot of faith inside of government here. And so something different needs to happen inside of this community. So when people come up here, they know they're going to be treated fairly. You know, I've been pursuing this, trying to get my development rights sold on that properties since 2019. Yesterday, I saw that John Needham's property is going to be up for discussion on March 18th. There's full disclosure, Andy Stipe, who does all of your appraisals for all your properties out here, Andy Stipe relies on me for his data for those appraisals. Okay, so there's all sorts of issues behind how people who are considered friends of people inside of the community and how those folks are treated and how outsiders and newcomers are treated inside of this community. It's a real problem. So last year, when the moratorium was enacted, there were 2 hearings that took place on May 16th. One was a work session in the morning and one was the town board meeting in the afternoon. An hour was deployed inside of the town's resources talking about 149 Ram Island Drive. Because 149 Ram Island Drive had an illegal basement build out inside of it. Everybody needs to tune in and go rewatch that video. All of the, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Somebody broke the law inside of this community. We've got to do something about this. People are out there, you guys are gonna discuss the large house moratorium. People are gaming our system and all of this stuff. When the manor is right down the block, it's 2,651 paces away from your front door, and they're doing all of these things, and nobody's doing anything to enforce the law over there. In that instance, I'm sure you remember, the people who purchased that home had nothing to do with that illegal build-out, and they were fined $26,000. They had to come out of pocket for $32,000 for something that somebody else did inside of a property that they had nothing to do with it. That's how hard the hammer comes down inside of this community when you guys want to deploy it. I don't know how Sylvester Manor is going to necessarily be dealt with inside of this thing. The last thing I want to see happen is Sylvester Manor go away. Right now, they've got $3.5 million coming their way from the Mellon Foundation to clean up that property. Somebody's going to need to come up with a real creative solution for how to solve these issues that are out there. They took another $500,000 from the state of New York. I've got copies of those filings that they submitted with the state of New York. The thing is littered with fraudulent statements.
You're wandering into territory that we're not in charge of.
These are items that I want people to be familiar with because prior to me showing up 2 weeks ago and reporting this to everybody, apparently nobody knew that a 243-acre not-for-profit was operating down the street with offices and parking. It wasn't just a special permit. There's certificates of occupancy that were never issued. If they were issued fraudulently. There's business licenses that were never issued. If they were issued fraudulently. There's all sorts of things that are taking place. There are daycare facilities over there. That place is the lead paint epicenter of the universe. There should not be children over there. Please don't get me started on that. And so there are many, many issues that are out there.
We will look into this.
I just want to go through my paperwork fairly quickly.
7 minutes.
Pardon
You
me?
said 7 minutes, we're up to 12.
We're up to 12, are we? All right, well, I think I'll.
Better than 7 minutes.
I
12 is worse.
mean, I could go on and on. I could talk about how you guys didn't get in trouble for the Beyonce filming permit until I brought it up with the town. Is that a truthful statement or not, then? Because I don't think it was fun. People get busted around here all the time for things, and nobody is held accountable for that. Until I actually took the town and forced their hand. And even then, you were not required to pay a fee or anything else. You were brought in here, you had to pay the permit fee. That was it. There was no fine.
Permitted.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing took place. So in any event, I think you know where I stand, and I'll be back next week to hopefully hear where you guys are at with this
It
investigation.
may take longer than a week because there's a lot of threads to unravel. Just
Okay.
to set expectations. And Judy, on the other matter, Judy was supposed to be reaching out to you this morning to schedule a meeting with me.
I haven't heard from her, but I appreciate you telling.
Check in with her before.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Acquisition of his property.
Is there anyone on Zoom who wanted to speak on a non-agenda type topic? Okay. First item on the agenda is an update from Superintendent of Highways and Commissioner of Public Works.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel like I'm at the big kids table today. This is fun. So yeah, we've decided that we're going to try to do this sort of monthly. I'll bring you guys up to speed as to what things are going on in town for us, work-wise, especially larger things. I'll start with the scale house. As everybody knows, we scheduled to close the scale today to do the transition of the old scale house to the new scale house building that we have. As of me leaving to come here, it's in place. The old one is gone and the new one is in place and is in the process of being rewired for the electric, and the scale company is there hooking the scale up. I'm hoping it might even be operational this afternoon, but it'll definitely be operational tomorrow. And we have a couple, just a little, sort of little kinks to work out as far as just some of the interior stuff, but we should be back and running tomorrow is the plan. And the guys did a really good job with it. We sort of had it all planned out and really wanted to get it done in one day. And I think we're going to do that.
They'll have air conditioning.
They'll have air conditioning, heat, it's got a new bathroom, the whole thing. And hopefully it's rodent proof for the most part. So that's what we're really hoping for. We've been doing it for the last couple of weeks when we've had good weather. This is remarkably good weather today. So we've started with our sort of annual tree trimming and roadside, brush cutting back. We're out in Silver Beach. The crew is out there today doing, trimming overhead trees, anything that's in the right of ways on the side of the road that's ours. So they've been working hard at that. We're getting ready to start grinding the brush pile up at the top. If anybody's been up on top of the hill, you can see the brush pile has been growing. Our grinder was down for a couple of weeks, but we went to our grinder operator and excavator operator, Brett Page, drove to New Jersey, had picked up a part, had another thing rebuilt while he was on site, and it's back, and they've got it all back together. So he was helping with the scale lifting today and putting it into place. But if the weather tomorrow is supposed to be a crummy day, I think it's supposed to get rain, but we'll be back grinding, before we know it here. We've been working here in Town Hall with a new water tank went in, a new pressure tank, and also we put a sump in the basement of Town Hall to deal with any of the flooding issues that we've had over the years. Hopefully that's going to help tremendously. We've got it piped outside right away. And we've done the same thing at Goat Hill. As the restaurant's being leased up there. We do some of the maintenance stuff inside that building for them. So we put a new sump in the basement of that place as well while we were doing this one. And we've actually we put a new water tank up there as well and a new pump. So they should be in pretty good shape up there. We rerouted some more plumbing for them. So I know the new proprietor is up there. He got the electricity turned on from PSE&G, and he is gung-ho to get started. So he's up there cleaning and doing things. So that's exciting. Hazmat Day is coming this weekend. For those of you know, it'll be this Saturday. So the guys will be there collecting any of the home hazardous material that people bring in. You've probably seen the Asplund trucks on the road. They're here. They're going to be here for about 4 more weeks, probably. They're doing a lot of tree trimming over in the wires for us. So they've been using the old highway shop as their staging area. So that's why you probably see a ton of trucks parked down there. It's also doing double duty because you've probably seen the Hawkeye trucks down there as well. They're the white trucks. Asplund has all the orange trucks. So Hawkeye is the company. They've been doing all the pole replacements on Brander Parkway. The poles are all installed. Now they're doing the overhead wire switches for them. So, and they seem to be moving along pretty well. I've only really fielded one concern. I won't even call it a complaint about traffic on that road because of the work being done. But I think that's been, pretty good. So, and they're going to be here. They estimated it'd probably take them 4 to 5 weeks start to finish. So I think they're getting towards the end of, they've been here for a few weeks already. But they're really good guys. They've been very accommodating. Also, if you saw West Neck Water they're running a new power line as well as a new water line from the West Neck, from the West Neck substation for Suffolk County Water now, and running it over to the 2 new wells that they're going to be putting at Goat Hill. So if you saw the county road on West Neck was torn open once again, it's like the never-ending paving job out there. But they did a really good job. They're very efficient how they get it done. It's been repatched. It's pretty good, I think. And now they're doing some tree trimming down there, down near the old well house down off of West Neck. And we're assisting them with some of the removal of some of the debris for it. They're going to be taking down a couple of dead trees down there. They're doing all the chipping and all that stuff, but we're going to remove some of the logs for them. So I told them we'd work with them for that. And then I think the last thing I have is I just want to update everybody on the Congdon bulkhead job that's, we had put out to bid. We've decided to send it out to bid again because I felt like the numbers from the last time we had this, they were high. And we've heard from some potential bidders that they didn't realize or that they didn't get adequate time to submit the second time around. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to open it up again. I'm going to advertise it this coming week. It'll be in the March 7th online and an imprint edition of the Reporter. I'm going to give them 3 weeks. So the 28th, the bids will come back, and then we will open the bids on the 29th. I'm saying this publicly, so they'll all have plenty of time. And this way, hopefully we'll get more bids so we could get a variety of, because the last time I thought they were very high. I know it's been 2 years of this process because we waited so long for the permit from the DEC, but I feel like some of the numbers are a little crazy considering, I know it's 2 years, but it's only 2 years. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. I'm hoping we'll get more bids this next time. I think that's pretty much all I have for right now. If you guys, do you have any questions or anything for me?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Ken.
Sure, go ahead.
We received a letter with some concerns. One of them was at the gate, the Bowditch Road, that apparently was always locked.
Right.
And that was part of an agreement. It goes back when, I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. I guess we'd have to FOIL request the town clerk. And it's open now and it's being used all the time. And they're concerned about it. Traffic's in and out.
Right.
from that gate that never was supposed to be open, only an emergency basis. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can speak to it. I want to open it. I want to keep it open. I feel like what I'm trying to do, it's a two-part thing for me. One is I want my office to be more approachable from the public. I want the public to be able, my office is right at that gate. I actually am the guy that opens that gate every morning, and I pretty much close it every night when I leave. I want the public to be able to come in and out of there because it's also from an accessibility standpoint for me. I want them to be a little more comfortable getting there. I'm gonna be moving signage and such there so people know that that's where the office is. Because right now, as it exists, I think it's a liability because people basically have to drive into the recycling center. They have to meander their way through the recycling center, up our road that comes in through our, sometimes it's right through the work area where the loaders are operating and all our large trucks and everything. So my plan is I'm going to try to beautify it a little bit at the gate. I know there's been some concerns about some trees that I trimmed up around the fence line over there as well. My intention is when we get into the spring, I'm going to plant something along that fence on the inside, on the shop side of it, so we make it a little prettier, and like the deer won't be able to eat it. But I want it to be, my guys, mostly it's my guys that are going in and out of there with their personal vehicles. Occasionally we're bringing a truck through there, and obviously in emergency situations, we always go through there with a loader or a snowplow or something.
My concern is if there's any covenants on that deal.
Yeah,
That's all.
I don't know, Albert, to be honest with you, but
Yeah. The other part in conjunction with that is there's acreage behind the houses on North Monantic Road. There's a strip of green space there that's part of the affordable housing project.
right. Yeah, well, it's green. It's still green. I mean, there's been
Yeah, that's all.
The only thing
I
that's,
don't know if they're tied in, I
Yeah,
know
the
that
only-
there is covenants on that land.
yeah, the only thing that's not green there, and it's been there as long as I've been here, and I mean, when I say been here, I'm saying as long as I've been on Shelter Island, been here, there's the dog pound that's up there. That's the only permanent structure that's there. Everything is green. Last year, I personally, when I was on the crew, I cleaned a lot of that area that was up there of all dead material that was up there, took it all out there and we replanted grass and everything up there, and it's as green as it gets. Occasionally, yes, we do park maybe a boat trailer up there. Currently, there's 2 floating docks sitting up there, but nothing that's permanent and nothing that, we didn't take down any live trees and all that area where it comes, that whole area behind those houses, and then what's in front of those houses, like where the cat colony is, all of that, or was, I don't even know if the cat colony still exists, but that area is still, it's green. I mean, there hasn't been anything, we haven't changed anything to it. If anything, I've made it better, quite frankly.
There is stuff there now.
There is, like I said, the dog pound is a permanent structure, but that's been part of that.
There's floating docks there.
There's 2 floating docks sitting up there right now, but they're sitting on grass. I mean, they could be picked up and moved, but I don't
I
think,
just,
Yeah.
so I didn't know if you were aware of that. I was never aware of it.
yeah. Well, I would like to say this too. I'm going to say this for you guys too, but I'd like to, since I've got you all a captive audience here, since we're talking about it, this is a good example. I think it would be good. Maybe we could do a town board field trip one day, and you could all come and visit me at the office, and then we could take a little, some of you have seen it, but we could take a little tour around the property and just kind of tell you what's going on where, and so you can see everything. And then this way, we're all kind of on the same page.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Good.
How do we find out about this possible written agreement with the residents of Bowditch Road?
That's a good question. I don't know. We'd have to.
I look at Amber.
I'll take a look.
You could take a look. I don't really know. I mean, I know in the time that I was working for the highway, working as before I was the superintendent, working there, we did utilize that gate during snowstorms. We did utilize that gate for, when we maybe were running a loader or something up to the IGA for things, to pick up cardboard or something like that. But it's been something I've said for years. Why can't we use it? Why don't we use it? And I think it makes, for me, I think it makes I think it just makes logistical sense. I'd rather have people be able to come, if they need to come see me in the office, or anybody in the office for that matter, I think it's safer to come in off of that road. Let me tell you, of all the entryways that are up and down Bowditch Road, that area is about as safe a spot to come in and out of on that side of the road, first of all. And I think it's important from a safety standpoint of keeping people out of the working area, because we got a lot of big trucks coming through there, and you'd be amazed. People don't know. They get lost and they go up to the top of the hill, then they come around the back, and now they're in another working area. I just think my plan is to really try to make it so if it's allowable, I mean, I'm going to keep doing it until you tell me not to. But I'd like to make that someplace that people know that this is where they can come to see me and come in and out of there freely. So, but again, if I can't, then I guess we'll reevaluate.
There's a question for me. I'm just curious. What are we doing with all the mulch?
What are we doing with it?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to try to sell a bunch of it right now. I mean, this is what, once we
I
get
don't think
into
we're
the
having
spring.
much luck with that, are we?
Well, we sell quite a bit of it every year. I mean, but we also, I mean, I have to tell you, these last couple of years have been an astronomical amount of organic material coming into the facility, from land clearings, new constructions. I mean, there's a ton of material up there, and we're doing what we can. We've utilized a lot. I'm planning on utilizing more of it at Goat Hill this year, much like we did in the past. I was very involved with the spreading of that material at Goat Hill. I plan to do that again this spring as well.
And I know you don't have a real answer. It was
I don't.
a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
So we did apply, we are applying for a burn box in the
Yes,
state.
that's true.
Something we're working on too.
Right, which hopefully will reduce some of that material. Yes, we've just agreed to phase one with the company to look at the parameters for the burn box. They do work in other places, and that will hopefully can reduce some of the material that's up there, because it's a lot, and it is hard to, but we do get rid of quite a bit of it.
Speaking of burn boxes, I mean, there was a fire there last summer, quite a fire, that the mulch caught.
Yeah.
And the plastic, the bales of plastic bottles caught fire, and I guess it was
Yeah.
extensive fire.
Yeah, the mulch fires, they take place sort of on a yearly basis. I mean, it's a hard thing to avoid happening. They're not ever huge infernos, but what happens is you've got that organic material breaking
Understand
down,
that.
it gets hot.
The bales of plastic bottles.
The plastic, that was in my time of ever being here, I never saw anything like that happen. And I'm not sure, we still don't even know what really caused that to take place, but I know that was a big fire when we had it. But Albert, in my 11 years that I worked for the highway department before I was in this position, I never saw any plastic or cardboard catch on fire at that place. Certainly not any plastic. So, I think it was a rarity. I'm not sure really what caused it still, but we keep a pretty close eye on that stuff.
One of the objectives too is that there's a lot of stuff down at the old South Ferry, the old highway barn property.
Yep.
And eventually we're gonna have to find a place to put that. So that's my question about the mulch or areas where we're gonna put this stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a plan for existing to keep it within the recycling center?
Yes, I have a preliminary plan. I mean, I've had some thoughts about this as it comes down the road. There's a lot of things right now that are down at the old highway barn that need to be accessed, first of all. There's a number of old vehicles that we're in the process of. Some of them are going to go to municipal, some of them are going on municipal to try to sell them. One is an old mower or tractor that we got from the county. Jay tried to secure it. It turned out to be just too much money to rebuild an engine for it. We're going to try to give that back to the county. There's a number of things down there that can go. But then there's, the majority, there are things down there. We do keep some trailers down there. We do keep our hot box down there. And then there's obviously all the material that we use for the drainage projects on the side of the road. I do think there is space to be utilized at the recycling center that we can use, but it's going to require taking back maybe that area where very preliminarily thinking about it, where the bamboo exists on the old Gruber property as we go out of there. And and there's plenty of space there, but it's going to take a little bit of work because we're going to have to, I think it's going to require some drainage to be put in there, which we can do ourselves. It's going to require some material to be put down. So it is drivable. So if we have to bring trucks or machines in there to remove some of that stuff, and we're going to be, utilizing some of those things. I've got on my whiteboard in my office, I've got 4 areas already identified that we're going to be doing drainage projects with this year. So that's going to get rid of some of that material down there too. I do have a plan for it. I mean, it's a very preliminary plan, but it's going to take some doing, but I think it's possible to do. Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. All right. No problem. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh. All right.
Mine's not.
One question.
So last year, I relocated a well on the recycling center property. It's like as you're leaving on the left, concrete ring around it. It's about a 6-inch diameter well.
Yes.
That could be used for a hydrant. We just need to go back and kind of figure out exactly what was put in the ground when it was originally installed to see,
Okay.
because that could help with fire suppression should mulch go kablooey again.
Yes, we can. I know
Something to
that.
just follow up with.
No, there is something, yeah, that has been there and there was something there for a while. So I can find out about it because I know I can talk to Jay about it because it started with Jay and I know it carried through to Brian, but I can check on that for
Yeah,
sure.
'cause that could be something to follow up with before we get into the smoldering mulch season.
Yes, no, it's true. And just to those wells too, just as another thing that I forgot to mention, but it'll be coming up. We're going to be, the DEC is requiring 3 more test wells. I think 3 or 4 now. It's escaping me right now, but they're more monitoring wells that they require. There's going to be 2 up on, I think it's 3 total now. 2 up on top of the hill and on where the mulch is. One on the sort of north side, the other on the south side, and then another one will be on the sort of western piece by where the topsoil, where we screen topsoil now. So the Fagan Engineering Group, who we've used, in the past, they've been handling it all. They came and met with me and Joe Fenora, and the DEC representative was here to just do a site visit to make sure that that's where they were going to go. So once that is resubmitted to them, that they've approved it, that the locations are what they've approved, then we're going to be looking for a well driller. And again, the engineering company is helping us with that too. So I'll keep you apprised of that as that comes up. But that's, that'll be happening in the next couple of months here. Mostly as the weather breaks, springtime, I'd say April-ish. All right?
You want to respond to that letter or do you want me to respond to it and just run it by you?
You can do that. That's fine.
Do you want to ask them if they have a copy of this agreement? They
I
signed
don't
it.
think it's a written agreement.
Oh,
It's a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can look back in the files.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, I can look through anything that I might have too to find it, but I will say, I'll reiterate, I feel pretty strongly about it from a safety standpoint, really. It's just, I think we're just adding another issue that could potentially have a collision with something over there. There's a lot of big equipment and a lot of big things driving around in and out of there all day long. And I prefer to keep the public out of it if I can avoid it.
Will you route?
That's, if the gate's open, the public goes in.
Yeah, but they only come into where the office is.
I'm just, you just drive down the hill.
Because it's gonna, I'm gonna be redoing signs everywhere for it. There won't be anybody, nobody has come in through that gate yet to go to the recycling center yet, since
Right.
I've been doing it, since I started January 1st. So, and once I have a sign there that says, this is where the office is gonna be, it's gonna have a sign that says the office is here. And I've just notified you all on television and I'd be happy to notify you. I'll be happy to notify you all again in the paper and whatever, that's where it will be. If they wanna come see me, we're gonna change a few things up there for them, but, and have big signs that say, like, do not enter if they go past that gate. So we're going to be covered. I've already had signage made. And it's just a matter of, it's been cold and frozen, so we can't really do it, but it's coming.
And we'll route our trucks through The recycling.
We'll route our trucks, yeah, no, I've been telling the guys, for them to not take any of our large vehicles, only their personal vehicles that are coming through that place, they can exit through there, but anything that's equipment wise or anything shouldn't be going in and out of the gate. They can go out the normal exit of the gate, by the wet garbage, exit way. All right,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Have a good day, everyone.
Always a pleasure. I can't wait till next month.
Oh, actually, before you leave, is there anyone from the public who has a question?
Oh.
Sorry.
That's all right. I love sitting next to Steve.
Okay, so I don't see any hands, so.
All right.
Okay.
Well, till next time, Steve. Maybe get a little more room the next time.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Kenny. All right, the next item on the agenda is the large house moratorium, and we do have some draft legislation, which we'll have Stephen walk us through in just a minute. But as people who were not at the town board meeting last night may have noted, that we have put on for public hearing in March to extend the large home moratorium for an additional 3 months. It'll go to the Suffolk County Planning Commission again to ask permission to do that. But one of the important things that we need to do, and it's just because the timing of it, just expiration dates, we have to put it on for public hearing so that we can pass the moratorium timely before it expires. So that was purely housekeeping, but we do need to work on this so that when we go to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, we can show them that we are in fact making headway on closing this out. Hopefully, this can be the last extension. So Stephen, I'll let you walk us through the proposed legislation.
Yes, so I'm going to use for example purposes, section 133.6, which is District A residential. If you look at that section, right now, the current lay of the land is, if you want a house that's larger than 5,999 square feet, you have to go to the town board for a special permit. Now, a special permit is defined by state law as an authorization of a particular land use, which is permitted in a zoning ordinance or local law, subject to requirements imposed by such ordinance. Now, in my mind, the use is not different than a permitted one-family dwelling. The use is residential regardless if it's 5,999 square feet or 10,000 square feet. So I think it's sort of inappropriate to use a special permit as the vehicle for review. And I have concerns about that because, again, because of that in and of itself, that I don't think it's the proper vehicle. But secondly, if you look at our special permit criteria in our code, the town board has to look at this through a lens of something that, again, is geared towards uses, not dimensional deviations. So if you look at 133-35, it takes you through general suitability, location, public services, environmental concerns, and site development. These are the lenses that you have to look through when you're evaluating an application for a special permit for a quote-unquote large home. And like, for instance, one of the factors is that no substantial hazard to life, limb, or property because of fire, flood, erosion, or panic is likely to be created by reason of that use. Now, that's wholly inapplicable, right? And again, the terminology is important, and throughout that section, it's that the use will be in harmony. The use will encourage the use. And, talking about public services and things like that, it's just not appropriate. And my third concern is that because we're all familiar with Article 78. If you approve something or you disapprove something, an Article 78 can be commenced and it goes in front of a judge. And I just want to read from a case that talks about, the difference between special permit and a variance. The classification of a particular use as permitted in a zoning district is tantamount to a legislative finding that the permitted use is in harmony with the general zoning plan and will not adversely affect the neighborhood, as opposed to a variance, which would allow an otherwise prohibited use. And that's a prohibited use if it was a use variance, whatever. But an area variance, again, is deviation from the dimensional requires. So basically, a special use or a special permit is something that is already deemed to be in keeping with the neighborhood if you meet A, B, and C. And we have nothing in our code of A, B, and C to really view it through. Additionally, the Court of Appeals held there's a fundamental difference between a variance and a special exception permit. Special exception and special permit are synonymous. The courts have repeatedly held that the inclusion of a permitted use in the ordinance as a special use permit is tantamount to a legislative finding that the use is in harmony with the general zoning plan and will not adversely affect the neighborhood. That's similar to what that other case said. And then it said, although not an entitlement, uses permitted by special permit are generally considered as of right uses that are subject to a public hearing and conditions for approval. Goes on to say that the applicant requesting a special use permit need only demonstrate compliance with any legislative imposed conditions on an otherwise permitted use and is only subject to conditions attached to the use to minimize its impact on surrounding area. Importantly, the decision to grant or deny a special use permit must be based on evidence in the record, and a proposed special use permit cannot be denied based solely on generalized community opposition. So again, a special permit is deemed to be permitted for the most part versus an area variance, which is not. And so judicial deference is given to area variances, to the zoning board who would issue an area variance. The judicial deference is much more for that than given to the town board and going through a special permit process. So what I'm recommending is that if you see in the draft legislation, is that we just take out the section that makes it a special permit. And then the default position would be that the only thing that's allowed dimensionally in our code is one-family dwellings with a SFLA under 6,000 square feet. If you want to exceed that, you would have to submit an area variance to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, what does the zoning board do? Well, any municipality that has a zoning ordinance must have a zoning board of appeals. And they're the only body that's charged with granting area variances or use variances. The town board can't do that. So it would have to go to the zoning board. And that's within, town law, specifically 267. And 267 also defines an area variance. It shall mean the authorization by the zoning board of appeals for the use of land in a manner which is not allowed by the dimensional or physical requirements of the applicable zoning regulations. So when you look to the code, the zoning board of appeals here is authorized to grant variances. We have that, great, we did it. So what they look at as far as their guideposts versus this hodgepodge inapplicable mix of things that the heretofore the town board was looking at, they look at specific statutory guideposts that were enacted, I believe in early 2000s or late 90s. So it used to be a creature of case law, what boards would have to look at to determine whether or not an area variance should be granted. But then New York State enacted a statute that specifically says what the zoning board has to look at. And I'll just run through them real quick. Will the granting of a variance cause an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties? Again, hypothetically, someone wants to build a 10,000 square foot home. The zoning board's going to have to see, will the granting of the variance cause an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties? Will this house loom over the next door neighbor house? Is that house in keeping size-wise with the character of the surrounding neighborhood? Can the benefit you seek from this variance be achieved by some other method? What other methods have you considered? Are there other alternatives to 10,000 square foot house? Maybe there are. Maybe there's a way you can redesign it to accomplish your needs for extra bedrooms, or have a guest house of a smaller nature that will not create the need for a variance. How substantial is the variance? Again, if we have a cap of 5,999 square feet, where, mind you, that is the strictest on the east end and probably the strictest in the county to have that cap of 5,999 square feet. So we already have a large home law here. How substantial is it? So if you go looking at it, 5,999 square feet and they want 10,000, that's pretty substantial. So these are factors that the board is weighing. And will the proposed variance have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental condition in the neighborhood? Will the size of the house create a negative impact on the environment? The zoning board is skilled at reviewing this all the time. And let's, for instance, runoff from the property, number of bathrooms, things like that, septic issues. So they do take that into account. And then the last factor that they look at is whether or not this was a self-created hardship that you need the variance. Obviously, any home above 5,999 square feet would be a self-created hardship. So as we talked briefly, hypothetically, it's going to be a tough case to make to have a larger home. And the zoning board, who is trained, they get, it's not a lot, but they're mandated to have 4 hours of training a year. And this is all they do, is do area variances. I don't think they've ever done a use variance. So they're the experts on this. So my proposal is, again, it's very simple. The amendment would be to strike out in each residential district the ability to get a special permit and just leave it as a plain vanilla area variance. And in going over it recently, I'm thinking I'm going to make another tweak to what I presented. And instead of keeping it, because right now it would be in the permitted principal uses, it doesn't make sense. It says principal permitted uses, permitted residential uses, and it says one family dwelling with an SFLA under 6,000 square feet. It shouldn't be in the uses section. The use should just say single family dwelling and one family dwelling, and it should be in the bulk regulations. Because the bulk regulations, for those who don't know, are the dimensional regulation section for each zoning district. So I want to put it in there, and I'm going to add it to 133.6B. And again, I'm using it for an example. There's the two other residential districts that this will apply to. But the verbiage, and again, I just worked on it, and I'll clean it up if it's not good enough. But it says the square foot living area of a one-family dwelling should not be more than 5,999 square feet, and then nor less than 12,000 square feet of which. So I think it's perfectly fitted into this already existing section of the residential districts. So again, it's, as far as an amendment, it's relatively simple, but again, it is taking the jurisdiction away from the town board and giving it to the zoning board, which I argue is the more appropriate body to be reviewing these.
So the 5,999 square feet, what does that square footage consist of?
Well, we have a definition in the code, it's square foot living area. So it's square footage of heated and/or air-conditioned area within the outer walls of all structures on a residential lot. So we call it large home, but it's home and accessory structure. So it's both of those. So if it's a conditioned space, basically, and it doesn't include unfinished basement or attic, garage structures without being conditioned.
Can it be written as total square footage then?
Oh, yeah. You
Not just conditioned space?
No, without
everything.
Yeah, listen, this is,
I mean, to avoid the thing that, what was it, 149 Ram Island Drive, or whatever that situation, I remember.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
yeah, no, you're the authors. You can definitely change that and make it more expansive than just condition, absolutely.
I mean, I understand the moving to the ZBA, I guess. Maybe I've seen too much of a slow creep. There's always the little more, which is frustrating. And then it starts and then it snowballs, and then all of a sudden you're at 39 previous applications that were approved.
What, as far as precedent?
Yeah,
No,
So there's no way that the ZBA, is there any way that the ZBA can cap this? I know they're a variance-driven
No.
board, but
again, so, again, statutorily, you're required to have a ZBA, and it has to be a safety relief valve from the zoning code, because the zoning code is an impediment on private property rights. So to make sure that zoning withstood constitutional scrutiny, they said you have to have the safety relief valve. So they have to review each application independently pursuant to those standards.
I mean,
Do we feel that changing it to 5999 for every structure on the property?
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up next is I'd like to, yes, change it from SFLA to a new definition that looks like it needs to be added because I didn't see anything in our existing definitions
For gross.
in code 133 that has gross. In talking to the building department, if we stick to the 6,000 and we encompass all of the unconditioned space, then that generally, and I can't remember if the number was like 3,600 square feet or 3,700 square feet, would be what you actually got for livable space when you consider basements, attics, the building envelope itself. So do we want to keep it at 6,000 or do we want to increase it a little bit to take into account?
Make it like 9,000.
I would say,
Yeah, or,
yeah, 9,000 or 8,500 or
yeah, once
something
upon
like
a
that, but
time, the code did say
it was
8,500.
8,500.
I just
And
haven't,
some, I don't remember when it dropped down, but it was originally.
right, and was it SFLA then, or was it total space then?
I'd want to keep it at 6.
Mhm.
I don't know, why we could, whatever, I just look at it differently. I don't know why we consider more,
Mhm.
honestly.
I mean,
My reputation probably precedes me, but
well, let's see the language change, and we can then talk about what the number is, but I also don't know why we would need to be more than 6, but let's have a look at it.
Well, if you're going from gross, from habitable square footage to gross square footage, that includes spaces that people typically wouldn't have lived in, but are already included in their house. So their garage, their attic, unfinished basements,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
accessory buildings. So you need to,
That's great.
Good.
you know,
May I just interject here since part of this was we had recommended, here, let me put my video on too. Sorry about that. We had recommended going to gross because there's so much finagling with the with the net the way it is now, it is something, and actually the definition is conditioned and finished. So people argue what's finished, what's not finished, and we just felt it would be a lot clearer if we went to gross square footage. And I totally understand, Albert, your concern and your desire to bring it down if possible. The only thing is that it would get really, really small. It would be, in other words, you're going to lose about a third of the house because all of a sudden an unconditioned basement becomes counts towards your total. So that's a third of the house in most cases because we only allow 2-story houses. In fact, it's an increase of 50% if you look at it that way. And then if you include attics too, it would go even further down. And if you go to gross, then you're not including the perimeter thickness of the walls because we measure from the interior of the walls. And you're ending up with a house that's actually below what a lot of middle-class houses are in size now. I think, in other words, I wouldn't jump to conclusions either way. I'd say this would be something that could be sorted out. But there is a reason that you would probably want to up the number for gross square footage, because you could conceivably in a house with an attic end up, the same house would suddenly have to be half the size to trigger that limitation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense, but Reed, what would you suggest as a reasonable number?
I don't want to, that's policy, which I don't like to get in the middle of. I'm just trying to explain.
But you're on the ground, you're out there, you know what all these houses look like out there.
Well, I would say that, what I'm arguing for in terms of, how you adjust it to gross versus net, I could give you a recommendation of what the equivalent of 6,000 square feet is now. As
Okay,
for,
That's good. Is that 8? Is it?
well, I'd have to sort of parse it out. Maybe we could come up with some examples and see what they actually are. I haven't done the calculations exactly.
That would be very helpful for me at least.
Yeah. What I would say is maybe the thing to do is to look at some actual houses and find some that seem like they're right around the reasonable limit and use those as models rather than, because these are kind of abstract numbers unless you really look at examples. I mean, that's sort of my sense. Does it,
I agree, Reed.
Yeah, well, if you could, provide us with that information, that would be really helpful.
Sure. And maybe why don't you come up with some houses that you think are too big and some that you think are just right? And we can see what the actual
Maybe little
square
bears.
footage is.
Yeah,
Lots in.
I don't like porridge.
No, but you know what I mean? In other words,
Yeah.
in other words, I think sometimes people talk about abstract numbers, and what you really need to do is, find some concrete examples and then back engineer it. Like, this is the size. We don't want them over bigger than this size.
Good.
Does that make sense?
That's fair, totally, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
I just want to.
my concern over that is it seems very subjective, so I think you have to couple that with some empirical data.
Well, I don't think it should be a standard.
Like what is the average house size on Shelter Island? You could start from there.
Started pulling that information.
Yeah.
So I'll look at it some more. I have a lot of that broken out.
No, I'm not suggesting it should be a standard.
Yeah.
But we need to actually be able to put eyeballs on what we're talking
No,
about.
without a doubt.
Yeah,
Right.
visually.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say is, ultimately, I can't speak to the legal precedents and that aspect of switching things over to the zoning board, but it seems to me that ultimately it's probably should be somehow related to lot size, because it seems to me that when you're, ultimately, there are two issues. At what point is a house too great a burden for the environment? But also, and I mean that the environment broadly, but it seems to me that a lot of what the problem is like what we have on 18 Bowditch, where everyone's complaining that this structure is too big. And the problem is that it's too big for the lot. And what we want to avoid is the McMansion syndrome, where you have a giant house on a small lot. And it's the thing that ruined, the lanes in Amagansett and the lanes in East Hampton. It sort of seems to me that that's maybe part of what we're trying to address here.
And that's actually a good segue. I know it's a separate agenda item, but it's actually a companion local law that I'm proposing. It's pyramid law.
Before we get to that, I
Okay.
just have one question still back on this. So by putting this into place, everybody who is already existing with whatever house size they're grandfathered in,
Correct.
they got passed into the old code. So what happens if they do a renovation or do something? Like, how does it fit in when somebody wants to do a change of some sort?
Change, they gotta comply with the current code.
But what happens if making this change makes the existing house too big?
No, I'm saying those would be pre-existing nonconformities, and then they would have to go in front of the zoning board, but that's something that weighs in their favor, that it's already existing and they want to add on an addition. Or whatever they want to do.
May I say one more thing to address what Ben just said? which is that one of the reasons we wanted to make the change to gross is because one of the ways that people work around this is that they build a house with an unfinished basement, they get their C of O, and then they finish the basement as a way of getting around the limitation. By going to gross, you would limit people's ability to cheat by preventing them from creating additional habitable space going over the line without us being able to see it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So, okay, so to take that a step further as an example, so I've got a 5,000 square foot house with 1,500 square foot basement, and I want to finish that basement. Do they have to come before us? They're already grandfathered in.
and not grant,
Well, they have
They
to get a
have
permit
to.
to finish the basement anyway,
So
but
then
now
they
they
have to go to-
exceed.
I would say
Yeah,
maybe a special is, because for pre-existing non-conforming houses, you go to 133-23A, a legal non-conforming building and structure may be altered or expanded without a special permit from the ZBA so long as such action does not create any new non-conformity or an increase in that non-conformity. So it may, if you are expanding the non-conformity, you're going to need a special permit and potentially an area variance. If it did not exist, if you had an unfinished basement, just like we just went through with that other situation where it is what it is. That was an existing basement. They wanted to finish it, or it was finished without the benefit of building permit. Push them over. So that's the same way to be handled.
So in that instance, they would still have to come before us.
But as, you know, the town board took into account, like, again, it was an existing structure already. There's not going to be any impact to the surrounding neighborhood because it's subterranean. No one's going to see any change or whatever. And that's things that could weigh in their favor in the balancing test of an area variance.
Maybe I'm missing something, which is very possible. But if you have a house that's 5,000 square feet, and 2 floors, and you count those 2 floors, but it also has a finished basement, which isn't counted. And we change the gross, and you all of a sudden count that finished basement, and it pushes you to 6,500.
The finished is counted already.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's only unfinished to finish that much.
okay. Got it. That's,
If it's finished, just to clarify, if it's finished and conditioned, then it counts as square foot living area. And that's one of the things, they'll finish a basement and have it be unconditioned. And it doesn't count as square foot living area, even though it's effectively habitable space.
So in essence, we're going to rely on the good faith of people to hold firm to not condition or not build out their basements.
No, not at all. In fact, this is what saves us from that problem. Right now, we're relying on the goodness of human nature to not cheat. This would be a way of,
You're making it
Very-
gross, they can't cheat.
Right. Right. If you make it gross, then it already encompasses.
For new construction.
For new construction.
which is.
What happened at 149 Ram Island Drive?
they had a huge unfinished basement.
And it was finished.
No, let me finish.
Okay,
They got approvals for an unfinished basement. They got a C of O for an unfinished basement because they didn't want to go for the special permit. 1 week after they got their C of O, they started work finishing the basement. Same contractor. It was done very cynically, and it was also not the people we were dealing with. It was the previous owner, but the current owner purchased the property knowing that this violation was in place. So it wasn't like they were unknowing, and they negotiated a lower price on the house because of the violation. They knew they would have to deal
So
with it.
in this case, the gross would be the shell. And if they decided to finish it, they could finish it because they built to their max shell. So if they
In
didn't
other words,
want to,
they would be limited to a much smaller footprint by virtue of the fact that the basement would count towards your square foot living area, whether it was finished or not finished. That's up to you. Does that make sense? That's why we. I
If you allow the gross size, let's say to be 8,000 square feet, and that does not include the basement, it's the two
No, it
floors
would-
finished
it
are
wouldn't-
6,000 square
That's where
feet.
we're at now. We would be including the basement, whether it's finished or not now. So that
In that
basically,
8,000.
What I'm saying, let me.
Yeah.
Arbitrarily, somebody has a 6,000 square foot house with an unfinished basement and an unfinished attic. What's to stop them from finishing that space?
the whole point is that that space is already counted towards their gross
Have
size.
any
Yeah.
impact on that?
Yeah.
None of this would
Yeah.
change them doing something without a permit. So if they have that unfinished space, if they want to finish it, they have to go and get a permit to do that, a building permit. Changing this law doesn't impact what this
That's what I'm
person
saying. We're
existing
relying on
has.
people's
House.
good faith,
Well,
not
that's what-
increase.
No, but we're what this is protecting is the new construction.
Right,
Then we don't have to rely on their good faith because the shell is what it is. You have 8,000 square feet. If you want to keep it unfinished, unfinished. If you want to finish it, finish it. And that won't exceed the cap. So going forward with new construction, we solve that problem.
right.
and this
Yes.
include all structures that are built on the property,
Correct.
including garages.
Correct.
Okay. Maybe I should fucking against this.
And
Or-
currently, as things stand, the 6,000 is not just the primary dwelling, it's all structures on the property.
Right. And yeah, I mean, the reason why the 6,000 works now is because it's the habitable living space. It's not the gross area. So you can have a garage that's just used to store your cars, or you can have a shed for your tools and your tractor or whatever, and it doesn't count towards the living space. So, that's where
the
this
negative
number,
consequence for going gross.
right. So that's why you either have to think about either keeping it habitable living space and, figuring out a better way to monitor the conversions of unfinished space to finished space. Or if you go gross, you have to think bigger than 6,000 because you're encompassing everything, including unconditioned garages and storage sheds and.
Or you
things
can
like
go
that.
gross for the most part and then exempt unfinished, unconditioned garage.
We're relying on enforcement and tracking things, that's all.
I don't want, yeah.
And
I want
that's-
it gross,
We don't do
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
but we're almost building in an allowance for that by allowing more gross space. You're allowing for an increase in habitable space by allowing a gross addition. You-
No, we're doing the
There's
opposite.
no-
We're doing the opposite, Albert. In other words, put it this way, why don't we sit down and I'll sketch it out for you if you want. It's actually doing the opposite. Because the unconditioned, unfinished areas will already be counting towards your amount. You'd end up with a much, much smaller.
So they're going to be counted into the 6,000 square foot?
Yes.
Yes, that's the
All
whole
right, so
point.
what was the increase in gross?
Well,
I missed.
the increase
To
is,
account for that.
if you count everything into 6,000 square feet, that's now not enough for a reasonable house. So you call it,
Yeah, so
8,000
let's
for
take your
instance.
example of 5,000 square foot. So you've got a two-story, the footprint is 2,500 square feet. So you've got.
I understand that, but
But-
you're allowing 8,000 square feet, and some of that is not going to be conditioned to finished space. How are you going to stop that from becoming conditioned space?
Well, that's why we're putting in a cap and including the unfinished space so that we don't care. We're just concerned about what the whole bulk looks like. What they want to do with the interior is up to them.
Okay.
And
all right.
that's where we've been
I
having people,
don't,
people
no,
have been flouting that by 1 week later coming in and finishing the
Right.
unfinished space.
we're trying to block that from happening anymore.
okay, all right.
And a lot of things that we see come before the ZBA at times is, somebody's like finished something that they shouldn't have finished and turned an attic into a bedroom. That's not up to code,
I
so.
mean, you've seen all the plans. Art studio, and we all know it's not an art studio. But Okay,
All right,
further discussion, but
Okay, so you're going to make a couple of those changes.
yes.
Reed is going to, we'll give him some examples of houses that we'd like to analyze, just to understand what the square footage difference, SFLA versus gross, would be.
Yeah, I'll work with Reed to come up with a gross
Mm.
definition that he's happy with.
Probably one in the state
Yeah.
building code.
And
here's the law.
this is something that is going to, it's legislative law, so it is something that will go to a public hearing. So I'm not going to open up things that will have public hearings to public discussion during work sessions, because there is a process for the public to weigh in. This gives us an opportunity to continue working on it, making modifications, and then when we set the public hearing, the public will be able to weigh in on the record with their comments, just to kind of lay out like the new rules of engagement this year.
Well, especially since this isn't necessarily what's going to go to public hearing.
Right,
because It's
exactly.
a work in progress.
Yeah, look, this is going to change next week.
Right.
So that being said, now we go on to the pyramid law.
Yeah, and this one shouldn't be much simpler. Best laid. Christina, can you put it up on the? So basically, a pyramid law is that from every lot line, you take a 45-degree angle and you go to the center, and then you flatten at the height limit in that zoning district. So for instance, you see how we got two 45-degree angles, and then the flat top. Flat top would reflect, this is a diagram from Southampton. It says 32 feet is their max height. Ours is 35. So the 35 is the tallest the building can be, regardless of the pyramid. And then the pyramid accounts for the side areas of the lot. So this would prevent against houses leering over onto neighboring properties, and would also keep houses mass in keeping with the neighborhood of. So it's what the amendment would simply be in addition to the bulk regulation section of each respective residential zoning district, where it speaks to height. And then just add on simply, in all buildings and structures on any lot shall remain within the sky plane of the lot. And then we just add a definition of sky plane to the zoning definitions, and there'll be an area which begins at all property lines from the average elevation of the existing natural grade adjacent to that building or structure prior to site disturbance, and extends inward at an angle of 45 degrees.
So how does this change the side yard setbacks? So
Has
let's
nothing to do.
say- No, okay. Like, you have to have a minimum of 100-foot frontage, right? Typically, that's
Okay, right.
like our average, So,
With a 50-foot front yard
Is your
setback, if
question, where
you're
do you
double.
start the 45 degree? Do you start it?
no, you start at the property line, I understand that, but like, I guess I'm trying for visuals on different size properties. So if I have a 1-acre lot with 100-foot frontage, where am I gonna be able to start building my house so I hit the proper, like?
You have to take both into account when you design it. You have to take in the side yard setbacks
Front and back.
plus the sky plane.
So
And
you have to
that's
take the setbacks into account with the
correct.
property line.
Correct.
This will force
So-
houses to be smaller.
Yeah, and Reed and I were discussing this before, because I was trying to get a visual on, and it's a nice isosceles triangle, we finally.
Oh, yeah, no,
realized. So if your front yard setback is 50 feet in double A, then when you get to that 50 feet, you can go up 50 feet. So like, we're good
Right.
there. Side yard setbacks, 30 feet. So you'd have to stay within the setback in order to go up the 30 feet, depending on how tall your house is. Because I was trying to get a visual on what
Right,
that
that's what I'm trying to get.
sky
at.
plane looks
There's
like.
actually a really good visual in East Hampton's pyramid law. They have a diagram that deals with this issue.
Mhm.
It shows you the setback and how the house can fit on the setback with the angle. But the problem is, it's really hard to understand their law if you're just like, someone who owns a house. And that was my concern with this, but I think you described it pretty cleanly, and it's easy to understand, to me at least.
Yeah, again, it's just one other factor when you hire an architect or an engineer that they have to take into account.
And so the relief valve for this is the ZBA.
Correct. If you pierce the sky plane, so if you look at this image, that chimney is piercing the sky plane.
So if they went with a modern high flat roof and the corners pierce the sky plane, they'd go to the ZBA for an
Correct.
area variance?
Correct. And what's typically done is, because I've done these applications in municipalities, is that you do a review of the homes in the surrounding neighborhood, do the pyramid, and see if there's already a historical sky plane set based on
Right.
areas that have already pierced the sky.
So I can see that there's a couple areas where this may not be practical, like looking at the B and B1 zone. I'm not sure how this will work in those kind of lots.
Yeah, we could potentially
So-
exempt, I think, Rita, you on there?
I'll send this to you.
I guess not, but I'll work with Reed on that and maybe have him come into our next work session and discuss it.
Because I know we were talking.
He's coming back.
Actually, at some point, put this up on the screen and
Yeah,
walk me
Christine.
through that. That's where I was like, what?
Oh, you have like a slanted property?
Yeah,
Yes.
Steve has this, she'll put it up.
there it is.
Okay, so it's average natural grade.
Yep.
So even though it's like this, there's a calculation that surveyors will give you the average natural grade, and that's where you,
It's called somewhere in the middle.
correct. So, yeah, so,
So if that's there, so shouldn't then the 45-degree angle start at the average natural grade?
grade, yes.
It doesn't seem to do that there.
Then you take the average of the 2 points on the highest point, take the average.
Okay,
Yeah. Christina, do you have?
Yeah, it starts at
Yeah.
this higher point.
oh, so that's the average natural grade there. Looks like the highest natural grade, to be honest with you.
Yeah, again, this is for just illustrative purposes, but there are, and again, this isn't going to be codified.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
what the surveyor will have to do is determine that based on lots that are not level. So you'll have to,
so a surveyor will decide this and not the planning board or.
Well, just- yeah, surveyor and an engineer, architect, and they'll put their stamp on it certifying that this is the average natural.
I'm okay with that. Other question. We're making the changes to the other code, but we're also want to do this. To me, they're married together. So how do we do them? I don't want to be in a situation where we do one and not the other.
These are married, these two?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah, so we'll set the public hearings for the same meeting on this.
okay. As long as we, yeah, so if we can pass both together, that would be awesome.
So the dimensions are, whatever, the angles are set on the existing property without any
Well, any artificial alteration.
alteration. Because in this example, actually, it would allow an increase in height, per se. It's not that dramatic, but it was an increase in height of the house that could be built based on,
Okay, so again, with height is always going to remain 35 feet or whatever it is. That, the height will never increase.
all right,
It's mass in the sky plane.
right. No, I understand. I'm just looking at it because it's uneven. It's going to push the limits up more.
No, I know.
Not to exceed 35, yes.
Yeah, but then again, they take the average, so it might be higher and other is lower, and then they take the average, and then that's where they start the 45.
Right.
Yeah, because I just, looking at this, the B zone, the side yard setback is 10 feet. So I can see how you could be compliant with the side yard setback and the height, but then still be non-compliant with the pyramid law because of the dimensions of the lot. And a lot of the B zone lots are smaller. And B1 zone, same thing as municipal building, we're gonna probably be non-compliant with our basic zoning for some of those. So I could see maybe wanting to have an exemption for the B and B1. So maybe something to think about.
Yeah, that's absolutely something that we can do.
Yeah. Pyramid law, definitely.
See? And, yeah. Front is 30, side is 10 for C.
Right.
Size, you know.
So well, I guess you just have to go to the ZBA. The ZBA is going to get really busy.
Yes.
If people have wetlands on their property, things like that, that they have to maintain setbacks from, and then you have the pyramid law. So people are going to want to shift out of the wetland setback. They're going to want to shift to maybe a flatter area of the property. Then this is going to cause more need for variances because,
But that's a compelling factor in making your
Right.
case,
right,
is that the wetlands and the 100-foot,
right.
buffer.
Yeah.
I think, again, these are exceptions should.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm thinking of all the potential unintended consequences of our actions.
No, that's, but
Right.
again,
So-
that's why you have the safety
Freshwater
relief
chemicals,
valve.
all these things are all gonna.
So are you suggesting we exclude the wetlands? from
No,
setback?
I'm just thinking like as far as the bulk load that we're gonna be putting on the ZBA,
Mhm.
it's going to increase because we do this because if people have to rearrange how they position things on their property due to wetland setbacks,
Mhm.
now they
Okay.
might have more
Yes.
area variances because they have to get closer to the side yard or something like that that's going to cause,
Mhm.
maybe they're not encroaching on the side yard setback, but maybe it's a C zone, it's a 10-foot side yard, so they're compliant there, but because of wetlands, they have to be up by the side yard setback, but now they're not compliant with the pyramid because they can't hit.
Yeah, too big.
Yeah,
was an example
exactly.
of that,
So we're gonna have some issues
Mhm.
like that come up. So I'm just trying to think of how it could impact some of these other functions of the town. And then I'm just actually going back to the last one. When did we get away from scaling the size of the house to the size of the property? Because that was something that we had discussed prior administration, and then we ended here. So how did we get to that point?
Well, I met with each and every one of you. A consensus that I had was they didn't want to do a ratio, floor area ratio, based on a sliding scale on lot size and just make it flat, 5,999 square feet, and that's it. That can be, if the majority of the board wants to go back to that, we can revisit it. But it's my understanding that that was off the table.
My feeling was that introduced an arbitrariness to the process.
Having a ratio between the size of the lot and the size of the home was arbitrary?
Yes.
So the ratio.
That's the calculation.
Right.
Yeah, but you have to pick what the ratio is.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have to, like, just remember,
Yeah, well, we're making it up by 56,000.
Right.
yeah, but there was this one, remember we had the one with the list based and it called out what the maximum,
Yeah, that was too
Size
detailed.
what?
That one was too detailed.
No, I understand that, but we're getting to the point on an acre, you could have 6,500 square feet, and then you got up to 10,000 square feet on a 2-acre parcel based on, and that was just running a typical FAR ratio number. So that was the concern, that you were going to be able to be entitled to these large monster homes on these large lots. And it was my understanding that the majority wanted to just stay with the 5,999 square feet.
We always put a cap on it. So it's like you can't get any larger than 10,000 square feet, no matter how much property you have, or 8,000 square feet or something, you know.
That's how it's designed. And that's one way to go. The other way to go is to take a maximum number and put the pyramid on top of it. Either way, the pyramid sits on top of this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yes.
understand that.
Yeah.
I think the cap is better myself, but whatever you guys decide.
Mhm.
And we were leaning towards straight cap because there's the clarity, but yeah.
And it's already been in existence, so it's not like, I know the gross would change and dramatically impact
The
things.
growth dramatically.
But the community has already understood that and know it's in their institutional knowledge that it's 5,999 square feet. Realtors know it, everybody knows that's your cap. So.
Ponder.
Yeah.
I'll think about it.
Mhm. Yeah, as we start to look at like what we think is too big, what's size right, do our Goldilocks thing.
We also have to understand that we have this moratorium ticking. So we really want to get that done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going for a tour of the recycling center, we can tour a few houses.
Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Okay. So I guess for Reed, we'll get you some properties to take a look at for us. Did you hear that, Reed?
Yeah, sorry, having trouble unmuting. Yes. That sounds good. And I'm glad to sit down with anybody who wants to walk through the gross versus net issues, because it does get confusing, and I'm glad to meet.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we will pick this back up next week and Stephen will make some changes. Fit in a,
Hearing,
we'll fit in a site visit or two. Okay. Anything else on these before we move to the next agenda item?
Sure.
Okay. Fresh pond remediation. Just a little history on Fresh Pond. We had gotten a couple of grants to do the initial study, and Joe will get into the details a little bit more. So we got to a certain point. And moving forward, we applied for a grant. It was $1 million. Is that right, Joe? $1 million. It was denied. Joe has the details on, some of what was in the denial letter, in a way that we can maybe reapply. But I'd like for him to just come up and give us the overall picture and potential next steps and see how we want to move forward.
Right.
Whichever you prefer.
So the Fresh Pond project has been going on for nearly the better part of a decade now. The effort spurred before my time here through interest from a number of citizens in the community who were concerned about harmful algae blooms that became a recurring event at Fresh Pond seasonally. Fast forward to today, we've received a variety of county grants, state grants, local support to pursue studies about what was causing the harmful algae blooms in the first place. That's now since been identified. Funding also provided for remediation plans, designs to to remove the excess nutrients, which we know to be now phosphorus in the bottom of the pond. And we're working on two concurrent efforts that require both permitting and funding. We have a short-term cleanup effort, which is to remove harmful vegetation, which blooms every summer right around the area of the public access. It's more or less what commonly is known as like the lily pads. That process is funded or will be funded by the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association. We had a contract in place with a specialized lake company who would come at the time of the bloom and remove the material, dispose of it. But that project had not been permitted in time for us to do it last year. So that's what we call our short-term remediation project at Fresh Pond. It's funded locally, not from the town, but from the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association. The design work is done. The permits are pending. We understand that those permits will be available for us in the coming weeks. And so we'd be looking to execute that process this summer in a time that's aligned with the needs of the pond. So we sort of wait for these activities to happen, and then we have the contractor come and remove the vegetation. So that's a short-term project. The long-term project, which is a bit more robust, is for the actual rehabilitation, the full remediation of the pond. And that would require the removal of all of the excess phosphorus, which we've taken measurements and done analysis on. We understand what the current levels are. We understand what an appropriate baseline level is. And that study has been completed. That design work is nearly complete. Those permits are pending also. And that is the project which was part of the state funding application for $1 million that was just discussed, but was denied. The reason for the denial is that the permits were not secured. One of the conditions of the grants is that you have to have accepted permits to be eligible for funding. Ironically, the state is the one providing the funding and also providing the permits. Historically, because of the extended period for permitting, particularly on projects like this, it is acceptable to have permits pending at the time of the grant application. So the grant review committee looks at your filing receipts and your applications for permits, and typically that's a consideration, and it's not such a hard and fast rule. We've received feedback indicating that policy before. In this case, the project was never actually fully evaluated because they simply looked at the application and said, you have no permit, we don't care that it's pending, therefore you're not eligible for this fund. We applied for the permit several months beforehand, so it's not to say that we did it a week before the application. That said, permits from the DEC, permitting agency in this case, have become sort of excessive and challenging for us as a township, and I think broadly the community to secure. Jen Lewis was here earlier talking about the Congdon Dock replacement. That process took almost 2 years, sort of inexplicably, for a relatively straightforward application. So permitting has become a larger challenge. That said, I'm hopeful we will have this permit secured before the next funding application cycle, which is this summer. So my recommendation to the board would be to pretty much do everything we did last year in terms of grant applications for this long-term remediation project this summer again. When the application cycle becomes available with New York State, we would make the same request for funding and then reapply the projects, this time with permits in hand. And in terms of the permit effort, I've been working with Fred Thiel's office closely. They've been a tremendous help in opening lines of communication with the DEC. After we had reached out to Fred, not more than 2 weeks later, DEC contacted us seeking some more information about the project, and we have, for the first time, an open dialogue. So I don't know that this got stuck on someone's desk someplace, or be that as it may, we're now making some real progress. They've indicated, from the DEC has indicated, the short-term permit may be out as early as next week, and the long-term permit is still in review, and they have a couple more questions, but we have communication moving on that. So in terms of lining up with next summer's grant application, I'm hopeful that we'll be we'll be in a much better position with permits in hand for that.
You say next summer, you mean 2024?
Yeah, this summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the short-term permit is the permit for phase one, which is the vegetation removal, right?
That's right.
So that one we could have by this summer when we would want to do the remediation.
Yeah, there's really nothing that stands in the way of that project. It's relatively simple, and we have all of the pieces of that put together. Funding is lined up, contractors lined up. We had actually executed a contract with the contractor last year. We just never got the permit in time to do it. So that will be all set to do this summer.
Cool. Great.
Joe, could you describe the project for me? I know roughly what it is, but not being here.
So what happens every year at Fresh Pond, and what's happened over the last few centuries is
I understand that, but what the project
the solution.
itself?
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to talk about the problem with so the solution makes more sense. What's happened is that we've had an over accumulation of phosphorus in the sediment of the pond. And through the analysis, we were able to understand that accumulation of phosphorus took place over a very, very long period of time, not because of any individuals that lived there or any activity that happened man-influenced activity that happened historically. It wasn't any dumping event or anything like that caused this. But that excess phosphorus stimulates as a fertilizer these algae blooms at different times throughout the year. It typically happens when the temperature changes and the thermocline adjusts. So the colder water at the bottom that accumulates the phosphorus from the sediment moves to the surface. And now that fertilizing type material has access to sunlight where it otherwise didn't at the bottom of the pond. And you get all these conditions for photosynthesizing organisms to blossom. The project and the solution is to remove the phosphorus by way of filtration. So we would essentially be siphoning off water in slow rate from the bottom of the pond where the phosphorus accumulates. We'd be removing the phosphorus and the nitrogen as a coincidence to the process. And then we'd be returning the filtered water back into the pond. So over time, we would be sort of hyper removing the phosphorus from the system, and the water going back would not have these excess nutrients, and we don't have to disturb any aspect of the pond. So another common technique is to actually remove the material. If it was a smaller lake or pond, dredging would be something that you could consider, but the scale of this doesn't really make sense from a cost perspective or from a disturbance perspective to actually physically remove this. So this is sort of a non-invasive option to get those nutrients out. But it does take a while. It takes, somewhere on the scale of 5 to 10 years to actually remove all of those nutrients. But each year that you're invested in the project, you sort of inch closer to that lower level of phosphorus. So in year one, your risk is effectively the same for harmful algae bloom. But as you talk about getting into years 3, years 4, years 5, the risk of those things starts to decrease. And that's how that's where you'd be seeing the improvements in the water quality over time.
Is this a proven mitigation measure?
The technique officially is called hypolimnetic withdrawal, and it is a proven technique that's been used around the world. What's a little bit unique about making a statement like that is each hypolimnetic approach is a little bit different because each pond is a little bit different. One of the more common approaches is that the water is extracted, filtered, and then discharged someplace else, like into an adjacent river, and the water doesn't actually return. When we talk about the technique, it's common that you would remove the higher nutrient water, extract it, and then how people handle what they do with that is different in every case. So this one is somewhat unique in that we're returning it to the pond, but there's also a larger pond where you can handle that kind of return.
Least common in New York State?
No, there's not many techniques at all that are common in New York State. In fact, New York State is very much has a very limited approach to how you can handle these types of lake remediation, even compared to our neighboring states like Pennsylvania and Connecticut. Many of the techniques that are used in those states other techniques are not available in New York State. And that's why we're working closely with the DEC to permit this.
All right. What is the the cost now, or what was the cost estimates that you got last year or the year before? Or what were they, or where are we now?
For the long-term project you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the expected lifetime cost of the project over about a decade is a little over $1 million, $1.2 million was the estimate. And that considers two major cost drivers. One, the capital expense of the equipment, and then two, the operating expense of the equipment. So it's about half and half. So you have the upfront cost of the equipment to start the project, and then each year you have the operating cost of running the equipment. And from a financing perspective, that makes the conversation a little bit more in depth of how do you approach this. If you apply for a grant, usually it's a one-time payment. And then this is a project, though, that requires, you wouldn't outlay the initial capital expense for equipment if you aren't committed to running the equipment, for the next several years. So that's part of the broader discussion about financing. It's actually one that we've had with the state grant department because we wanted to make sure that they understood this was a long-term project and not just something they were going to pay for in a given year and it'd be done, the following year. And they support that. That was their response.
when was the estimate generated?
When? About a year ago now. Yeah.
Okay.
And what's the discussion around the remaining 0.2, the $200,000?
Yeah. So that grant for $1 million has a matching requirement of 25%. So coincidentally, our budget was about 1.2 million, and that grant provided $1 million that you would have to provide 25% of on top of that. So the total lined up perfectly with our budget constraints, our budget projections. Both we would have to provide the additional 250,000 to close out the project. How that gets allocated is something we would have to discuss with the state. And it's not really relevant now because we didn't get the grant. But in an environment where we did get the grant, all of that money's not due up front because of the operating costs of the project. So that $250,000, annualized would be a much smaller amount of money. And that's what the town would have to arrange, either to pay for itself, utilize WQI funds as a water quality improvement project, and or partner with the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association, who have demonstrated a willingness to raise money vis-a-vis their nonprofit to pay for some of these expenses.
Phase one, the short-term remediation project, what's the cost of that?
About $20,000.
20?
Yeah, $20,000, and that's permitting, design, and the execution of the project with the contractor.
What is you said that there's a filtration process.
That's right.
What's generated, what's disposed of, how much disposal, how much material is generated?
So the flow rate is fairly mundane. We've actually broken the project up into two scales. We have a pilot scale, which is where we would initially run the equipment and monitor the response based on the lake water's chemistry with the output. The primary components that are removed are similar to wastewater. It's nitrogen and phosphorus. And we're not dealing with the wastewater situation, so many fewer complications, dealing with lake water. We're not worried about bacteria or any other chemical contaminants. So the target components that we're looking for are phosphorus, and nitrogen happens to come out in that chemical process as well. So we're very much applying a wastewater approach in terms of removing the same nutrients from the lake that we would want to do for the aquifer. And it's a chemical filtration process with no other byproducts.
How much material is generated, and where does it go? Or what happens to that?
The actual, you mean like where does the phosphorus go when it comes out?
Right, or
It's a fairly
whatever's
mundane amount. It's a couple of pounds per year
that
we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not considered a hazardous material or anything like that. And so there's no special disposal constraints. In fact, vegetation removal at the short-term project, that material was going to go with the other organic material at the landfill, for instance. So there's no special disposal constraints on that either. Could be used as fertilizer.
When you and I had discussed this a couple of weeks back, I thought you had expressed concern about them not wanting to fund the operating part of it, if we could get the grant. Have you changed your thinking on that, or?
To clarify, it's not that the state hesitated to fund the operating component, it's that the grant had an associated window with which the funding could be doled out. I forget if it was 5 or 6 years, something like that. And the concern was that this project was going to inherently run beyond the window of the grant award. And so we were working with them to understand, can we sort of take that money first, and then we would kick in our match on the back end of the project. And they were amenable to that discussion. We never had to really finalize it because it never got awarded. What's different about this year's approach in working with the permits for the long-term project is that the state, for permitting purposes, has asked us to separate the long-term project, not to confuse you even more. But the long-term project is now separated into a phase 1 and a phase 2. So the phase 1 is pilot scale and phase 2 is full scale. And so ultimately, we would only be applying for funding for the pilot scale, which would allow it to be completed in that funding window. And the funding amount would be much less. It'd be less than half, just a couple $100,000.
Then we'd have to.
So then we would
Reapply.
apply again in a few years once the pilot was over, and it would convert to the long term.
But at that point, we'd have a better understanding of what our operating costs would be.
Yeah, exactly.
How much bulk we're removing that we have to dispose of. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. And the purpose of the pilot scale is not really to make major headway in removing. It's really to optimize what would be the full scale, to understand exactly what you said. What are the operating costs? How effective is this removal process? Do we have any flow
To
concerns?
make any tweaks to make it more efficient,
Exactly,
things like
yes.
that. Okay.
Is there any danger, well, it's definitely, of the grant going away during this time? By splitting in the pilot in full?
So the grant cycle is quite consistent, and it's not specific. I would define the risk as not specific to this project, but the grants do have annual priorities. So each year, New York State has certain priorities that are emphasized within the water quality, underneath the water quality umbrella. And so there is risk that if you're waiting a few years, that perhaps the emphasis shifts away from freshwater wetland remediation and moves toward drinking water priorities. But that's not something we have any control over. And there are other grant opportunities besides this particular state one, the Suffolk County's water quality. I forget the acronym. It's the county's equivalent to our local
PRP.
UPRP, right? So this project would be eligible for that funding pot as well. That's another annual award. So there's a couple of different financing strategies that we could shake out, even if one doesn't become fully available to us. The biggest hurdle is the capital cost of getting this installed. And so if you can get over that, your annual expense on this is much smaller. And I think you can piece together those bills.
Any more questions from the table?
So if we do shift to this pilot and full scenario, so the pilot grant amount can be enough to cover the purchase of equipment, the installation, and running it for the 5 or 6 year window. And that's one piece?
It's smaller than that. So the full-scale project actually has a small pier that we would install at the end of Fresh Pond Road, which would be at the end of the project turned over to the public as like an observation park type area, an access. And the pilot scale project doesn't include any of that. It's a smaller version of the filtration equipment that's going to be just temporarily installed at the end of Fresh Pond Road. So it wouldn't include primary infrastructure that the full scale would. It's a much smaller pared down version of what we just described.
Any questions from the public on this one?
Do we already have the funding secured for the phase one, the vegetation remediation?
Yes,
Okay.
I thought we did, I just wanted to make.
we did. That's coming from the Vermont Neighbors Association.
Okay. So that can move forward this summer,
Yes.
Yes.
Great, once we get the permits.
right, once the permits come in.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Right, the next item on the agenda are an increase in tow rates, and Chief Reed is on for that one. I had done a look back, and I think the last time we set towing rates was back in 2019, and it covered 2020 and 2021. So on the sheet that Christina handed out for all of us, that the day tow rate was $175 and the night tow rate was $225. And I guess this is something that we as a town board set the rates, and whoever wants to tow for us gets paid these rates. It's not like we have to go out for an RFP and hire somebody to do the towing. We set it, so just thought I'd lay that out. Jim, would you like to add anything to that?
I can just give you a brief on it. We currently have, we have an application process through the police department for people to get on our tow list and make sure that they're licensed, insured, and they have the proper equipment to tow for the police department. But with that comes other people in the community, whether in our community or visitors to our community, that could have an accident and they're not familiar with the lay of the land, and they'll say to a police officer at a scene, you know, I don't know who to call, and we say we'll call the next one on our list. And since we only have a list of two, we just rotate back and forth between those two companies. But there is an expectation from the public to have a fair rate. So in our policy, as the supervisor stated, the town board sets by resolution our tow rate. One of our providers, our local provider, had requested an increase in that rate. I did look at two other municipalities, East Hampton and Sag Harbor. Sag Harbor's rate is $250 for a daytime tow and $275 for a nighttime. And East Hampton is $300 flat rate, whether it's day or night. So the request is comparable to other municipalities, where as a resident, and you know, we kind of have to watch out for our local tow rate to a degree without any bias, because when someone has their car towed, if it's towed to their yard, if it's a local person, it's towed to Shelter Island, and if it's a non-local person or other vendor, tows it to Hampton Bays. So we try to, as fair as possible, work with it. Quite frankly, a lot of time people just request a local tow operator because they know them. But even when if the PD has a tow, we take them to our impound, so we don't have to worry about that. But this rate affects our what we pay, but we recover most of our tow fees through the court process when we impound a vehicle. Not to say that we recover them all, but the majority of them we recover. I thought that the request was fair, considering the other towns. Looked at some automotive clubs that are covered to insurance purposes. Post-COVID costs have hit a lot of our community providers, and trying to keep a local tow provider in the community and on our list is important to me, and I think it's important to our residents.
This is flat rate.
It's a flat rate, yes.
So when will the variable rate come into play then? Special.
I can answer that if you want me to, Supervisor. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you have a vehicle go that, you know, we've had them drive down Mananic Road and keep going right into the town landing and get submerged. That's where someone has to go underwater to secure that vehicle to pull it out. That's where the variable hourly rate comes in, and that's an easy example. You know, we all, you know, someone decides to ride out on the second causeway, their vehicle's not four-wheel drive, you know, and they're way out on the causeway, they got pretty far before they got stuck. That variable rate may apply in that situation too. So there's a couple of examples, if that helps.
Thank you. We'll set this at the next board meeting.
We would. How many tows a year do you think we are?
So the PD, I didn't look up that number, Supervisor, but you know, if we were around between 10 and 20, but it's not just us, it's the ones where we have an accident and we make recommendation and tow to their yard. So, you know, we could have, you know, 30 motor vehicle accidents on top of that where a request is made for a wrecker. And if you want that number, I can get those numbers for you. Our local provider is stating that, you know, there's less towed for the PD than we've had in the past, where certain laws have changed with DWI seizures and suspended license seizures, where we used to do more of those. That they're not in play anymore.
And Chief, this is separate from boats.
Yes, we recently, I'm not sure if this board or the previous board set the rates. We recently set the rates on both impounds and storage.
Yes,
We-
we did.
But
We
we
did
do
this
have a variable rate for that because, you know, if we had to take a sailboat in and we had to bring it to a marina and put it up on a lift and so we had something similar in that case too.
Any other questions from this table? No? Anyone in the public? Amber, if you put that on for resolution at the next town board meeting then.
Supervisor, so just so I'm clear on what's agreed to, is it the day-night rate?
Yes, 250 day, night 325, variable rate 175.
Thank you.
8 a.m., 8 p.m. are the cutoffs for day and night. Next item on the agenda is conclusion of the CPF audit. There was New York State came in last year. Actually, they contacted us, I guess, November of 2022, that they were going to do an audit of the Community Preservation Act. So they came in and did their field work in 2023, and we just got a letter from them. And I will read the audit objective was to determine whether Town of Shelter Island officials properly administered the Peconic Bay Community Preservation Fund to ensure that all collections were properly supported, recorded, and deposited, and that disbursements were proper and supported. And the key findings were town officials ensured that CPF collections we examined were properly supported, recorded, and deposited in full, and that disbursements were proper and supported. Specifically, of the 37 deposits totaling $8.5 million made to the CPF bank account during the audit period, they reviewed 10 deposits totaling $3.5 million. All 10 deposits were reviewed, were properly receipted, deposited timely and intact, and accounted for. Of the 103 disbursements totaling $6 million paid during the audit period, we reviewed 10 disbursements totaling $4.9 million. All 10 disbursements were adequately supported and approved prior to payment. There were no recommendations as a result of this audit. So that is a very good thing. They require a resolution for us to whereas the Office of the State Comptrollers requires an audit response letter approved by the governing body, I will just need authorization to issue and sign such letter, which will state that since we have no recommendations, there's no response required. So.
Really, sounds good.
That was good. So,
Yeah.
good job for our staff doing what they should be doing. Now it is time for around the table.
So we were all out last week. the only thing, since we were out last week, there really, there was a planning board meeting, I guess.
No,
No,
not last week.
not last week, but
There was ZBA.
The ZBA met last week.
yeah, I don't think I have any committees that met last week.
Right? Albert?
No, the ZBA met, but that's nothing, nothing out of the ordinary to report. Meg, you want to do the WAC?
Yeah, that was yesterday. I'll go over that. Is that all you had, Al? Okay. So last week we had Association of Towns, and that was from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and there were a lot of really great classes, learned a lot there. There was some on site plan review, there was some zoning classes, there was some, there's just a lot of good stuff. So learned a lot, really enjoyed going. Tuesday, we had our last CPAC meeting for a little while. We finished chapter 11. So right now, all of the changes and recommendations that the committee made are going to the consultants so that they can update the document and get it back to us. Once the consultants have updated the document, it's going to go back to the committee so the committee can look it over and make sure that their changes were incorporated as they intended. Once the committee thinks that the document's ready, then it will go to the town board. When it goes to the town board, it will also go out to the public for review. That way there aren't a million drafts floating around confusing people. So that's where we're at right now with the comp plan. And then I had an ETIP meeting on Wednesday. We're talking energy efficiency and resiliency. We're working on getting a meeting together between NREL, which is the National Laboratory, and PSE&G to discuss our existing energy grid on the island, its potential capacity to take on a solar project at the landfill, things like that. So we've got that meeting set up. And then we had a ZBA meeting. Other than that, what else did I have? We had WAC on Monday, so that was yesterday. Discussed the letter that's going to go out to the public a little bit more. So that we're going to do some more edits on that, I believe.
Yeah. it's gonna
Before it
get
goes out.
Yeah,
So
get
we're gonna-
recirculated back to us to
We're-
make any
yeah.
final
We're going
comments.
to talk about it at the next work session.
Yes.
And then followed up on fertilizer legislation is something that we discussed yesterday. So they're going to continue discussing that. One of the big questions that came up with that is there's a proposal to have the building department sign off on people getting soil tests to demonstrate that they need fertilizer in their lawn, which I think could become complicated. We need to talk to Reed and see if the building department can handle that kind of volume. We already have it that the contractors need to show their certification from the county when they renew their license with the town. So, that kind of covers all the professional aspects of it. The question is whether individual homeowners need to come to the town to get written approval to fertilize their lawn, and that could get very complicated and a little burdensome to the building department. So that they're going to revisit that and kind of look at it and see how we could handle it or how other places have handled that in the past. So those are like the big things that they looked at. So those will be coming to us eventually.
I didn't know we were supposed to report on AOT because I did a different track, so it might be a slightly different perspective. I mean, I can talk about it briefly. At the Association of Towns meeting last week, I was on the legal track with Stephen. And so some of the classes I went to were different than the ones that the rest of the team went to. And for instance, part of the legal track included the cannabis sessions. Now, the town of Shelter Island opted out of the cannabis legislation in the beginning, and unless we opt back in. But there was a small window when that legislation was passed to opt out, And if you're out, you're out. But if you ever go back in, you're in. It's kind of like the mafia. You can't get out again. There was a section on payment in lieu of taxes. There was a session on the Green Amendment and the secret changes of recent time. There was a session on cell towers and some of the legal issues surrounding that. There was a session on climate and the Decarbonization Act. There was a really good session on open meetings law and FOIL, which a few of us all went to. And there was also a wetland seminar, which was very interesting. That's it.
Yeah, actually, the thing that I liked about the Association of Towns is, except for, I think, the FOIL and open meetings law, I think we pretty much all went to different classes.
Yeah.
So we took full advantage of what they had to offer. Did more things that were supervisor, personnel kind of related, and, less budgeting this year because I've been to enough of those. So, but yeah, that was good. Other things that I had is I was discussing with Amber earlier. We had wanted to make a change to commercial activity on town property and have the deadline be February 29th. But between just everything that everybody's got going on, the change in the website, the forms didn't get changed. So there's been mixed messaging going out to the business owners. And so we have, I think, 2 applications back so far, 3 applications that we know have gone out, but 1, 2, 3, 4 others who have previously submitted applications have not sent them back in, or even, well, they don't have to request them because it's on the town website. But since some people think that the deadline is March 31st, as much as we wanted to get it moved up at the request of some of the business owners, I'd like to keep the deadline at March 31st this year. Part of the reason for the change actually came from the business owners when I talked to some of them last summer, who just wanted more lead time, because if they're going to be making purchasing decisions, upgrading, food trucks or purchasing more stand-up paddle boards, things of that nature, they wanted more time than an April, decision by this board. But we'll just have to work on that for next year's February and just keep on March. So Amber, if you could just re-advertise that, because I know you have put something in the paper, but just so that way we cover the
We
bases.
received a few more, but a lot of them are still waiting on their insurance or health department certificate.
So that was one thing. And then I met with the Bridge Street property owners, a few of them, and just had a good meeting. The first item on the agenda that I had wanted to discuss with them is whether or not there was any interest in trying to join the Shelter Island Heights property owners sewage treatment plant. Whether or not, we've talked about it over the years, especially with respect to fertigation up at Goat Hill, and that the fertigation piece is off of the table, but concerns about, the proximity of their, septic system, some of them may be aging so close to the water, whether or not there's still interest. So there is still interest, so we will start to step through what that evaluation process would be, and how to move forward if moving forward is a possibility. We also spoke about drainage and road closings and concerns there, discussed the speed reduction, volunteer park bathroom concerns. One of the things that we do want to work on is 2-hour parking down there. There is a section by the white picket fence that was previously excluded from the 2-hour parking, but the property owners down there would like us to revisit that. So we will put that back on the agenda this spring, so that way, if we're going to make a change, we can do so before the season hits. Discussed a little bit ferry lines, dock, there's a 2-hour limitation on the dock down there, enforcement. have spoken to one of the harbor masters about it, just to understand their perspective a little bit. And then handicap parking. Part of the 2-hour parking is where the handicap parking is, it exits so close to the road at the turn, so possibly moving that to a different location on the street so that it's safer. So that would be part of, if we change the 2-hour parking, we could incorporate that, if we even need to do anything, or if we can just move it. So there's a couple things to be investigated from that meeting. And I think that's all that I had. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address anything? Okay, I'd like a motion to go into executive session. We are doing interviews for WMAC today.
Makes sense. Second.
Okay,
Whichever one.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So moved.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Aye.